Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another Climbing the Rating Ladder game. I'm playing Zozo 4188, rated 2258. This is a strong player from France, and we're playing a Queen's Gambit. So, should I maybe play something a little different? I'm going to play a Queen's Gambit accepted, D takes C4. I don't know why. I was just inspired to do something different, so let's go for it. Okay, E3. Yeah, I'm going to play Knight F6. And white usually just takes the pawn. And let's go e6. Let's block any bishop takes f7 shenanigans in the future. I'll play a6. You know, one reason I'm curious about playing this opening more often from the black side is that I struggle against it sometimes with the white pieces, quite frankly. So white plays a4 to prevent b5, but I think black can be pretty satisfied with the results of the opening here. I don't believe a4 is the most theoretically testing move. And I'm developing some easy pressure on the center. So I can take the pawn on d4 whenever I like. I might do that right now, actually. I could simply play something like queen c7 or bishop e7. In theory, I might want to wait to take this pawn, or wait to move my bishop, I should say, until white takes me on c5. I think if I take on c5, white's probably going to go rook d1. That's something I've done myself in this type of position. So yeah, I think my candidate moves are queen c7, taking on d4 still, maybe b6 to go bishop b7. I don't think bishop e7 would be a big mistake per se, but I do think I want to wait a minute to play that. But let's just look at c takes d4 for one more moment, because I could play c takes d4, rook d1, and then bishop e7. Actually, maybe that's the thing to do. Let's take the pawn. Go ahead and make the capture. Rook d1 played. Yeah, and I'm not going to try to hold on to this pawn. If you get greedy, bad things can happen in a situation like this. So just bishop e7, get ready to castle. And we'll see if white wants to play. Yeah, white does want to play with the IQP. Okay, let's castle as planned. Yeah, I'm pretty happy to see that, honestly, because it's interesting to play these positions against the IQP. I'm usually playing with the IQP, so playing against the IQP does appeal to me. And I'm going to go knight b4. This is a common motif in these positions. Help better control the d5 square. I do not want white playing pawn d5 at a moment where white could just liquidate and open up the center, where I might be caught flat-footed. Caught flat-footed. Sorry, struggling to get out words. So that's the point of this whole operation. Yeah, bishop g5. So white is understandably developing pretty rapidly. So I could pivot the knight to d5. Knight b to d5. I could play something like b6. Although if b6, I have to calculate d5 again. And I wonder if with the bishop on g5, white is keen to play that. So it might be time to just immediately put the knight on d5. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to play knight b to d5. Could have considered knight f to d5 as well, but let's go knight b to d5. And next, if left to my own devices, I'm probably going to want to play bishop d7, rook c8. But I'll have to calculate if white can play bishop takes f6, something of that sort. Maybe I go b6, actually. b6 might be more flexible here. b6, bishop e7. Could also take on c3 if I want, although I'm not super keen to give white a choice of which way to take. So I think my choice is between b6 and bishop d7 here. I don't like on bishop d7 that white can take on f6 and then force through d5 again. So I'm leaning towards b6. And I'm probably going to play this move unless I see something wrong with it, but I don't. So let's play it. I think my bishop will settle in nicely on b7. I do create a weakness on c6 by playing this move, but I don't believe white can exploit it, at least in the short term. So also a6 becomes slightly weakened, but I've got the bishop and the rook both guarding. Should be fine. Hope you're all doing very well. I've been posting more often on YouTube lately. Thank you guys so much for the positive reaction to my first game in the Lone Wolf League on Lichess. I truly, truly appreciate that. I got a ton of amazing comments. Probably the best reception for a video ever, I want to say, on my channel. So Yeah, that really meant a lot, guys. I put a lot of time and effort into that video, making it, including the preparation, which you guys seem to like. I mean, it was probably a 4-hour ordeal, but I really enjoyed it. And we're going to do that for each of the games in the 11-week season for the Lichess Lone Wolf season. So more to look forward to there, guys. Oh, also, I will be doing a climbing the bot ladder for the website that I recently joined as an owner, Chessiverse. So if you haven't checked out Chessiverse, please do so. There was an announcement video that I made about my participation in the Chessiverse project, joining the team recently, and we're very excited about it. We got a really good reception on that as well. So you can look forward to a climbing the bot ladder. Basically, if you haven't seen my announcement video, Chessiverse is a site where you can play over 500 human-like chess bots. So if you're familiar with the Maya bots on Lichess, you might be familiar with this concept. We've created a platform where people can play against these bots, and they really do play like humans quite frequently, and they're only going to get better and more human-like from there. Okay, so knight e4. Yeah, I'm not really scared of this move. It offers a bunch of trades. So, of course, taking with the knight is the first thing to look at because white's going to insert bishop takes e7. Looking if I have any desperados there. I don't think so. So maybe I just play bishop b7 here. I don't really see what white is going for with some series of trades. Yeah, I'm just going to go bishop b7. I think I'm pretty solid on both f6 and d5 now. So let's let white come to us. My opponent just thought for a minute and a half on that move. So let's let white come to us. And they do take on f6. Probably I'll take with the bishop. Don't think there's a reason to take with the knight. Pawn takes looks ridiculous. So yeah, I'm going to take with the bishop. I'm pretty happy to trade. I mean, usually in these IQP positions, if you're the one playing against the isolated pawn, IQP stands for isolated queen's pawn, by the way. If you're the one playing against the IQP, you're usually happy to trade. So I'm a bit confused why white is doing this. And I think I'm a little bit more comfortable now. I think I'm a little bit better here. Probably nothing earth-shattering. Okay, another proposal of a trade. Now, this one I could think about avoiding, but the move that comes to mind is rook f to c8. Maybe rook a to c8 also makes sense. Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter too much at this moment. Rook a to c8, rook f to c8. Hard to say. Yeah, I'm going to go rook a to c8, I think. Contest the file. And if white takes my queen, I think I will take with the g-pawn at this point and try to control this e5 square. Leave my knight on this beautiful d5 square. That's the direction I'm leaning towards. White takes. So again, a simplification move. I'm just pausing because, you know, when your opponent plays so straightforward like this, you almost think you're missing something. But I don't really see what white is going for. I mean, I take with the bishop, and the pressure on the knight on f3 is pretty annoying. Let's pre-move the capture of the queen, because I think pretty decent chance white actually takes my queen now. But if white trades and then plays knight d2 or knight e1, I mean, I think I'm quite happy either way. There's maybe some bishop b3 type stuff if white's not careful, especially if they play knight e1. I have a feeling this game is going to go queen takes f6, g takes f6, knight d2. White's going to pivot the knight so I can't take it and double their pawns and try to cover that b3 square. Maybe white will consider rook c3 as well after a queen trade. It's not a guarantee white will trade queens, but I think... Okay, they play rook c3 right away. All right, so if I trade down on f3, let's just be very simple here. Or maybe I take on c3 first. If I take on c3, then I trade on f3, white's going to insert a swap of their own. I have rook c8 at the end, but maybe they have rook b1. Yeah, it's ugly for white, but they might be able to draw in some single rook ending, is what I'm thinking. And rook c3 is a prelude to doubling the rooks. So maybe I can think about taking and playing rook c8, keep the queens on. There's still a potential line like this, followed by rook b1. But if I can keep a pair of pieces on board, I like my chances in that endgame. And I can initiate the queen trade myself, but that doesn't feel as good. I don't have to trade rooks. That does allow white to connect the pawns, but given that rook c1 is coming, I kind of feel like I should. I kind of feel like I should connect the rooks. I like my bishop on d5, by the way, too. Unless I can win something with bishop takes f3, I think I'm going to keep it there. Yeah, so let's trade once, and I'm going to play rook c8 after this and see how white responds. We'll see if white goes passive with rook c1, or maybe they'll go active with rook b1. Ah, but you know what? If they go active with rook b1, then I could trade on e5 and grab on c3. And white's going to run into back rank issues. Okay, so that's a difference compared to if I had played bishop takes f3 and allowed this massive swap. And even that endgame, I might have been playing for a win. I could even play like rook c8, or rook c6 rather, when the rook came to b1, play that single rook ending. But I want to create a bit more pressure, keep some tension. Okay, time-wise, doing all right. This is a 10-minute game, by the way, no increment. I should have mentioned that from the top. So no increment. If I lose 14 rating points. If I win, I get 2. A draw is -6. But things are looking good for now. Very happy with this position. And rook d3 could make sense, but then I'm thinking about queen g6 in some cases too. Maybe target the rook. Okay, so white withdraws the queen. So now I could purely damage white's pawns if I wanted. And if I don't play that move, probably knight e5 is coming pretty soon. So what do I think about taking g takes f3 and then maybe give a check and play queen c2? That looks pretty good. I like the look of that. I could also play this queen g6 move if I like. But I think bishop takes f3 makes more sense. I'm going to go for this now, I think. Yeah, let's go for it. Because I do get to play with 2 pairs of pieces on board. And I think this queen g6, queen c2 thing, I mean, just hits a number of pawns. It looks awkward for white. Maybe I got to watch d5 in some circumstance, but I think for sure it looks irritating. I'm going to pre-move queen c2. There's an off chance white plays queen g5 here, and queen c2 is not a good pre-move, but I highly, highly doubt white's going to go for that. So whether white plays king h1 or king f1, I think I'm going to do the same thing. I don't see a reason to deviate. I mean, maybe there's some argument for king f1, queen h5, but I'm not going to waste time thinking about it. Now, because we've traded a bunch of pieces, but a pair of major pieces are still on board, I might want to play a move around my king when I get a chance, g6 or h6. But in the short term, I'm looking to create as much counterplay as I can against that rook on d1, undefended, and especially those weak pawns that white has. If I can win one pawn and keep the pressure on, I think I'm going to be pretty happy with this outcome. But we'll see. So white does go king f1. Yeah, and hard to say which way white should have gone with the king, because on f1, they're closer to the center, which could be good for the endgame. But also with the queens on board, their queen is more exposed to checks. So it's a tough call for white. Okay, so they play rook d2. This gives me an interesting choice. And I could just play queen takes c3 or queen takes a4, but I could also throw in a check. I could also throw in a check and just see where the white king goes. Maybe white will play queen e1. So white's giving me a pawn without a fight, but I guess if I play queen takes c3, they're going to trade and play d5 is my My inkling here. I don't want to overthink this though. I mean, I think even that outcome is very good for me, honestly. Like even that looks really tough for white to defend. I might just go for that. Could throw in that check too. Like that's tempting. Queen takes a4, d5. Messy. There's a lot of good lines here, but there's just a bit messy. I think I'm gonna go for the direct endgame. And I think we're gonna have a trade of queens, d5. I'll take the pawn. So e takes d5, rook takes d5. Then I'll play probably g6. And I think I have very good winning chances there. I'm up a pawn. And the main reason I'm going for this is white's structure on the king side is awful. It's not a good structure. Okay, white plays rook b2, though, so they surprised me. I looked at that briefly. I thought just rook c6, so let's do it. I mean, I'm up a pawn. Every single white pawn is isolated. This should be very difficult for white, if not downright lost. So let's centralize the king. Play a little faster now because there's no increment. Maybe that was a slip by white playing king d2. Okay, how do I free up my position? Let's start with king d5. I don't see a reason not to. Like maybe now rook c4 is a threat. And I got rook c4, rook takes b6, rook takes, and then rook takes a4. I guess there's some rook b7 ideas at the end. Let's play potentially useful move first, h5. I don't think I'm going to rush here. There's a very similar climbing the rating ladder game I played recently, actually. h4, maybe? Let's go h4. I'm not too worried about this pawn being captured. I just want to take away moves from white. Oh, but rook g5. Then maybe that's not an issue. Oh, maybe it is, though. That's annoying. Well, I think I got to go try this now. So white can take. I take this. Should be winning. Even if they win my f7 pawn, I get the a pawn too. So just don't get too low on the clock now, John. Okay, take. Yeah, and I'm going to take this one. And then let's give a check. Just force white back. I could check and go in the h pawn, but feels like pushing my majority makes more sense. So let's start pushing the pawns. Passed pawns must be pushed. Yeah, we're going to take. Okay. I'm actually not going to stress about the h pawn because these pawns are broken up. I don't think I should worry too much about them. The time, though, is an issue, clearly. Okay, push. Yeah, I'm really pushing it on the clock. b2 is the threat now. Check. I think I should pre-move a4. Yeah, I've checked what I could take, so this is good. Check. Let's go back. Should have played b2. It's almost in Zugzwang, though. Oh, that's mate. I was actually surprised that was mate. I was thinking, I don't know, I was going to drive the white king out and somehow figure that out. Is this actually a draw at the end, though? Like, how do I make progress if white plays king d3 back. Kind of a weird... Oh, no, I can just play a3, actually. Yeah. So I could just do this and then a2. I probably missed that a couple times. In fact, did I have that straight away? I probably didn't need to do the king shuffle. King g5. Let's see. It was here. b3 check. So I pushed a4. So everything's connected, which is great. Here, check. Okay, so yeah, I think the way to do it... No, I think I found the right way to do it. It's just that white had king b1. And if white had played king b1, then rook a2, and I don't know. That's maybe a draw. So probably my technique wasn't the greatest there. One thing I missed. Yeah, I underestimated rook g2. I saw rook takes g7, but yeah, like rook g5 was something that escaped my attention. Then I saw that I could play f5, but I think it was a little sloppy maybe allowing this. Maybe instead of h4, I should have just played g6 and solidified this chain. Although then maybe white can do the same thing, arguably, like this. But this is a better version, right? Because I don't lose my f pawn. Yeah, so I probably could have made that more difficult for white. I would have liked to keep my f pawn. Overall, though, a fairly one-sided game on the board. White played this too simplistically with the IQP. When you have that isolated queen's pawn, you want to avoid just pure piece trades because every exchange of piece further accentuates the weakness of the white pawn as we get closer to an endgame. That's a common principle. When you have an isolated pawn, generally piece trades, unless you're achieving something for these piece trades, are not in your best interest. So I'll be curious what the engine thinks. Maybe around here, yeah, queen takes a4 or possibly the queen check first were better. Arguably, I played this a little simplistically. I was expecting d5. d5 after the swaps, and I was ready to play this end game. You know, something like rook d6, rook b3. Or I suppose a5, intending to meet b5 with rook d6 and rook takes a6. I was ready to play this. Maybe bring my king over. But I feel like it should be lost with white having weak pawns. If the pawn were on g3, that's a different story. That's a pristine structure, but with every pawn on the king side being isolated, not good. So, okay, let's take a look at the game review real quick. And then we'll click into the analysis. So yeah, we had a graph that more or less corresponded to what I felt during the game. But then, yeah, it looks like white could have escaped with a draw towards the end. So we'll check with the engine, see where I misplayed that. All right, so let's play through the moves. Shrink me for a second so there's more analysis board real estate to work with. Yeah, so the Queen's Gambit accepted. I mean, I think an underrated defense against d4, c4, against the Queen's Gambit. It's a very old opening. It shouldn't be anything surprising when white plays c4 that black might take the pawn. I think it's actually more popular at amateur level than master level because it is pretty simple. By the way, I noticed my keyboard navigation doesn't work. Oh, that's because my keyboard is actually not plugged in. My keyboard wasn't plugged in this whole time. Anyways, you guys wouldn't see that. But okay, so yeah, I'm interested in playing this line more often for black because I've really struggled to prove an advantage against it from the white side. The most principled move for white is e4, occupying the center and preparing bishop takes c4. But you got to know some stuff here, like knight f6, e5, knight d5. There's a bunch of theory from this position where, yeah, white has a nice center, but those pawns are staggered and black has the d5 square. You also have to know what to do against e5, a counterattacking move. There's a bunch of theory here as well. So e3, that's one of the more conservative approaches for white. It's also the move I recommend in my free d4 course on Chessable, if you guys have checked that out. I think the link to that's in the description, actually. So yeah, just preparing to play bishop takes c4. Here too, black can try e5. as a way of looking to trade queens and get to a position where black has an edge because white has lost their castling right. Both pawns sort of flapping in the wind. So yeah, e5 is a pretty good response there. White usually does not take the pawn on e5 and does this instead. Here too, there's theory. This is another way to get an IQP position. But I played more classically. I played knight f6 and then e6. So this is pretty common in this opening. Black blocks in the light square bishop, but prevents anything with bishop takes f7 in the future. You could try some systems with bishop g4, but they're a little riskier, I would say, for black. Like if bishop g4 here, I think white can just play queen b3 and hit the pawns on b7 and f7. So e6 and working up to c5 is pretty common. Yeah, a6, a very useful move. Sort of like the Najdorf Sicilian. It almost always makes sense for black to control the b5 square. That's an important waypoint for both sides' pieces, especially for white's pieces in the middle game. Like when the knight comes to c3, it's just nice to control. And it helps black create this pawn wave on the queen side. You also see this in lines like the Semi-Slav defense. Another d4 opening, d4 response. Yeah, an a4, it says book move, but in my experience, like this isn't the most promising move. Yes, it rules out b5, but I don't think the damage, the long-term damage it does to the b4 square is in white's best interest. But white has played a number of different moves here. We can click into the Explorer, for instance, and just see the plethora of moves that white has played. Yeah, a4 is up there. But castles, queen e2, bishop b3. Bishop b3 is a prophylactic move. Just playing it before black goes b5. Yeah, knight c3. Yeah, castles, b5, c5, both playable. You do see a lot of queen trades, so stuff like this in this opening. This position has been reached a ton. White tries to prove a modest advantage. And in fact, at master level, you can kind of tell that there's a ton of draws in this line, right? That middle bar, that's the drawing percentage. Lots and lots of draws. So white tries to sometimes prove something here with their slight development lead. But look at black's position. I mean, utterly solid. Black's lagging in development ever so slightly, but I mean, having played a6, that is a useful move. Basically, white has traded castles and getting the rook to d1 for a6 here. And it's debatable if that's even going to give white an advantage with the queens off the board. So not all lines of the Queen's Gambit accepted are that dull. I mean, that can also be played dynamically too. Like both sides can play that for a win. But I don't know. This opening's a bit of an enigma to me because it has this somewhat passive, dare I say, boring reputation. But I think it's very interesting. And psychologically, if black plays one of the most simple things against the Queen's Gambit, which is accepting the pawn, but then doesn't get attached to the pawn. I mean, many of you guys know this, but if black plays b5, this does not work out well for black because white can start undermining the chain if a6 takes and black can't take back because of the rook. There's a well-known trap here. You all should be aware. If black goes c6 and there's a trade, black runs into queen f3, hitting this rook. And wow. This player ran into this open. I've actually played this player, Balaji Degopati. I'm surprised he played this from the black side. But yeah, even some very good players have apparently somehow a 2500 drew this from the black side. They gave up a piece in order to save the rook, and they somehow drew this. Wow. That's impressive. But yeah, not something you want to land or fall into there. So if black takes the pawn on c4 and then doesn't hold on to that pawn, this is what I'm getting at. The Queen's Gambit accepted is a fully viable weapon. You accept the gambit, but then you're fully willing to give back the pawn. So okay, white played a4, I played c5. Fundamentally, it makes sense for black to challenge white's 2 versus 1 in the center. By virtue of black having taken that pawn on c4, white does get 2 center pawns to black's 1, but this is key for black that you get to counterattack with the c pawn. So castles, I'm pretty sure this is just all very common book territory. Yeah, I played knight c6, queen e2. I took on d4. I paused here for a moment. Yeah, queen c7 is another move. Also bishop e7. Not b6, though. Interesting. Yeah, so it takes. Rook d1 was played. I just went bishop e7, yeah. And now white played the most enterprising move, e takes d4. So if white plays knight takes d4, how does this usually go? So trade. Let's say white takes with the rook and insists on avoiding a isolated pawn. Yeah, queen c7. This is what I was thinking. And doesn't, I mean, optically, it doesn't look like black should have problems here, right? Like this is a little bit loose for white, having to keep an eye on the bishop, and the rook is also a little exposed. Again, that control of b5 for black is so nice. If white plays knight c3, just not having to worry about knight b5 is huge. So the engine's suggesting something like this. Castle, bishop d7. Pretty straightforward stuff. Yeah, okay. So white accepts the isolated pawn. Castle, knight c3. Let's click over to the explorer. Yep, knight b4. I mean, this all looked vaguely bookish to me. So, I mean, none of these moves have been that difficult to find yet. Bishop g5. Looks like white plays knight e5 a lot. I do remember this. Bishop d7. So a lot of times black will just stick the bishop here, making way for rook c8 or even just bishop c6. Because what I was mentioning in the game about black not necessarily minding trades, it's okay for black to offer a swap of the bishop for the knight, the light square bishop for the knight. That's fine. As long as this imbalance persists, not like white's bishop pair is going to be anything to write home about. So bishop d7, this did not happen. White played bishop g5. What did I do? I think I played bishop d7. No, I played knight bd5. That's right. Yeah, I fianchettoed my bishop. So knight d5 gets the question mark according to the engine. Let's go to the explorer again. So it's been played 36 times, but wow, look at that winning percentage. Look at that winning percentage. So bishop d5. Yeah, the reason I didn't play bishop d5, maybe there's a flaw in this logic, but I just didn't want to make it easy for white to do this and then d5. Black has scored a win in 3 draws from here. What does the engine think? Take, knight takes, or bishop takes. Let's say knight takes. Queen e8 at the end. Okay. And what? If trade, bishop takes e8. Huh. Attack the bishop, guard the pawn. I'm going to play bishop takes b2 next. And I guess black's a sliver better here because of the 2 bishops on the open board. Okay. So maybe concretely that's nothing to fear. But I was consciously, especially playing down in rating, trying to keep pieces on board, trying to create more problems for white. But it does look like bishop d7 is one of the top moves. So let's find out what's wrong with knight bd5. Maybe it's nothing immediate. The engine wants knight e5. Is it just hard for me to develop here because if I play b6, there's knight c6? Or even, clear the way first. Let's say knight takes. Yeah, so there's circumstances like this where after a series of trades, black can be busted. That's that weakness of the c6 square that can crop up when b6 is played. Yeah, so if I can't play b6, probably bishop d7 is the next thing to look at. But how does this work? So another series of trades. Yeah, take. And if bishop takes, simply bishop takes d5 at the end. Okay. Well, that's good to know because I've definitely seen this position before. Probably even wandered into it from the white side, even though I was criticizing a4 in the opening. But yeah, this straightforward blockade, maybe not the best. Maybe not the best. And knight e5 is the way to try to demonstrate that it's not the best. And it's not easy for black to trade pieces. It's especially not easy to complete my development if bishop d7 is running into problems. Same with b6. Okay, but white played rook c1. And b6, okay, this is still not great according to the engine. It says, hey, you should take this opportunity to play the bishop d7 move again, John. And then we're looking at a roughly equal position according to the computer. But yeah, I always kind of feel these positions are harder to play for white if they don't have something concrete pretty quickly involving the IQP or like getting in d5 or sometimes even launching a kingside attack. White's pieces all occupy good looking squares, but what are they actually achieving? And what compensation, so to speak, does white have for that IQP? And sometimes white will try to lift a rook, play knight e5, rook g3. But these operations are maybe not so easily forthcoming here. And black is completing their development. All right, so I went ahead and played b6. And the engine recommends, what did white do? Knight e4. Yeah, knight e4, probably the first major step in the wrong direction for white. So the engine wants white to take. Okay, I was going to take with my e-pawn against that, even though I accept an IQP. Wow. So not only can white just retreat, and it likes white here, white can also play knight e5 in this position. Because if I take the bishop, knight c6 with advantage. Lots of weak stuff cropping up here, and white's going to win their material. So let's say I go bishop b7, bishop d3. And I guess it's the case that I'm just a little more passively placed than I would like. One downside I mentioned with b6 is that it's imperative that I keep an eye on the a6 square. So for example, I can't play rook c8. I would just run into bishop takes a6. Okay, so b6, this was a bit too luxurious of a path. I don't quite have this much time. Had white made a strategic exchange or thrown in knight e5 somewhere, I'm sort of scrambling. But white went knight e4, taking a lot of the pressure off of d5, trying to incite a trade on e4 or maybe on f6, but that just didn't seem that challenging to me. I was very happy to play bishop b7. I guess I can take as well. This is another line the computer's given. Just trade a couple pieces, then play bishop b7, slight edge to black. So yeah, it's remarkable what a pair of minor piece trades, how that changes the forecast for this position. Much harder for white to drum up play. So bishop b7, still pretty good. Now take on f6. Yeah. Engine saying bishop d3 or h4. Those don't look like that appetizing, though, at the moment. Bishop d3 I could kind of see. Maybe pivot the bishop back. Open the c file. Try to get something going. But I think that knight e4 move was a pretty sizable mistake in the wrong direction. Big wrong step. So, all right, we have this series of trades. I was feeling great here. The computer was only giving a small edge to black, but I could see this spiraling pretty quickly if white's not careful. So queen e5. I played rook ac8. Yeah, hard to say. I mean, I was also thinking about rook f to c8 to keep a little more pressure on, or a little more defense of the a pawn. Rook f d8 also makes sense. Yeah. Wasn't too keen to initiate the trade. I just didn't want to give white knight takes e5 with tempo. And again, if white initiates the trade, I was going to take with the g-pawn in all these cases. So rook f c8. White takes on d5. Yeah, I don't know. Hard to give white advice at this point, but I think they're suffering here as well. And this cosmetic defect, these doubled pawns, they're not as big of a deal when the queens are off the board. White doesn't have a dark square bishop that can come to h6. I'm totally cool with this. And I'm happy that I'm covering, especially that e5 square. So in the long run, I could lay siege to white's d-pawn, maybe even double the rook somewhere, move the knight away. Knight f4 looks really juicy, right? Get some attack going. I would love to play this position as black against pretty much anyone. So bishop takes d5. Yeah, and I really thought white was going to trade queen somewhere here. They go rook c3. And okay, so this was correct. Take and rook c8. It connects white's pawns, but it allows me to get the remaining rook in the game with tempo. And I think white just has concrete problems here with bishop takes d4. Or bishop takes f3, rather. Looming. So queen e3. There's also rook c1. Yeah, what was I thinking on rook c1? I don't know if I was thinking anything super deep here. I was considering queen g6 in some circumstances. Maybe that's not much, but crossed my mind. I mean, by the way, important to note, rook takes c3 isn't technically a threat here, is it? Because white could reply with queen b8. So say white played, I don't know, h3 passed. This would be a horrible blunder. Always got to watch your back rank. All I can do is just give up a couple pieces before I get mated. But I could trade queens and then take on c3. I could play bishop takes f3. There's many ways to get the job done here. So rook c8, queen e3 defends. Yeah, and I went for this now because that just seemed like a good moment to make this trade before white goes knight e5. As much as I like my bishop here. So we trade, I play the check, and then pre-moved queen c2. Yeah, okay, that tracks. So I'm really curious on rook d2, what does the engine think I should do? Because for the record, I think after queen c2, I'm going to win a pawn no matter what now. There's no question. So this was hard. I mean, I had 3 minutes left. Probably spent too much time on this move. Yeah, definitely spent too much time on this move. Went down from 3 minutes to below 2. But I was really uncertain which move to play, and also this queen c1 move. Computer seems to think they're all kind of equivalent. I could see queen takes e4 technically being best, though, because it gives me this outside pass pawn. The c pawn remains weak, and it keeps the queens on board. Maybe that's helpful with white's king on f1. I just wasn't sure about this d5 move, creating some confusion. I mean, it's probably nothing, but I just didn't want to entertain that. But yeah, in a longer game, I probably would have thought more about these other two moves. So we trade queens. Yeah, and rook b1. I really thought d5 was coming. Try to liquidate the weak pawns. Even though white's down a pawn, it's in their best interest to liquidate some of them at some point because they just have too many weaknesses. And then I have to take time out to defend against the back rank threat. I was going to play g6. Computer likes king f8. Not 100% sure how much I should trust the computer eval here in the endgame. Yeah, like this. I was mentioning rook c6 or takes. It feels winning. Again, bring my king over. Maybe strategically target these white pawns. But this might be worth looking into if you're really curious. But I think the extra pawn, the combo of white's kingside pawns being weak, it should be winning. If the pawn's on g3, I would probably bet on a draw, actually, with both sides playing perfect. So white instead played rook b2, targeting the b pawn. Yeah, and now it felt like I should win here. I bring the king right up. I was a little surprised white didn't play king e4, but I guess I can always play f5 if white does that. So how could I have played this in a way where white has really no chance? White's burning up their pawn moves. h5, I mean, this feels fine. Yeah, I think in hindsight, I mentioned g6, but I mean, maybe this was all okay. So actually is the thing to do g6 here. This is maybe what I was trying to articulate during the game and in the immediate post game, is that with rook g2, the reason I was surprised was not so much because of rook g7, but because of rook g5. And I don't think I articulated it so well, but I didn't want to have to retreat my king when checked, so hence I was looking at f5. But then it just seemed to me that white gets counterplay. But as I also mentioned right after the game, it's much better if I get the pawn to f5 and I don't literally allow rook takes g7, rook takes f7 while I'm off going and winning these pawns. Because I can win those pawns whenever I want, actually. So if I do it the way the engine's recommending, instead of rook c4 right away, play g6, allow rook g5, then play f5, allow the pawn to hang. I can still go here. Well, I can try to get cute with this move, but this loses. Probably just loses in an end game like this, and then I go over and push the B pawn. Equal material, but these pawns are discounted because they're double isolated. But yeah, with little time on my clock, getting towards under a minute after my next move, I'm not shocked I didn't make that determination that I should play G6 and only then play F5. Yeah, because now it's a little late. I mean, I could maybe play F5 here, but there's Rook D7, King C6. Yeah, it's a different circumstance now. It's better to lose the pawn on G6 with the pawn on F5 so that white doesn't have an easy check they can give. Nonetheless, I mean, this absolutely feels winning. But clearly I botched this somewhere, the conversion. So let's see exactly where I blow this. So white's probably doing the right thing. It says I should come forward. Okay. I've struggled with this with rook endings in the past, like knowing when to attack with the king and when to bring the king back for defense. I remember a game I lost to Erwin Lamy, this Dutch grandmaster, very strong Dutch grandmaster, also great course author, by the way. He has a course on multiple courses on Chessable, but one on the Carol Khan that's really good. I remember a heartbreaking loss I had in the Reykjavik Open many years ago. It was the final game of the tournament, actually. It was a single rook ending where I was worse for much of the game, but then I was drawing if I had played my king aggressively instead of going back, deferring to a couple of Erwin's past pawns. And I think I kind of made the same mistake here. King E6. So trying to stay in range of the F pawn. But this gives me much more purchase on the position, doesn't it? It's going to help box out white's king. And if white does something like rook F4, king C3, rook takes H4, I'm just in a much better position to help escort the C pawn, aren't I? I mean, we could just see how this plays out. Say there's a bunch of checks. It's probably actually very simple. These pawns aren't even that fast, nor are they connected. King A2, B2, interpose with the rook as needed. It's an easy win, actually. Looks so simple when you play out the moves. But yeah, in the game, I wasn't thinking about going forward with the king. I was trying to hedge my bets, keep my king in the radius of white's pawns. Probably this is still winning. And it's good to connect and advance like this. But white put up pretty stubborn defense, I thought. Yeah, here too, it wants me to go king D5. Probably helps control more territory and get closer to those pawns. Okay, H4 is apparently better, but we're both in more or less time scramble mode. I guess I probably around here missed some sort of easy win. I mean, even in the case of king C1, yeah, I probably win here, don't I? But how does it work? Let's say rook B4. How do I win this? The way to win is actually to go towards the white rook. Okay. Let's just say like this. King C5, rook B8. And I'm trying to keep the white rook in a position where if ever A3 is played, white can take. Free up the rook. And then with the king's help, I can start pushing the pawns or hide probably on the A3 square when checks come. And my rook is very annoying. This is where white's past pawns being disconnected and mine being connected really show. Yeah, that's not easy, though, especially in time pressure. So my king, it seems to me, was just going in the wrong direction. I should have gone forward and towards the queen side instead of back and towards the king side. And I'm still winning here, apparently. This is all correct. Oh, rook C1. Okay, so here it didn't occur to me that if I move the rook, white can't take my A pawn because I push and I promote. But is it that simple? What if white goes rook, king D2? Rook F1. Okay, go after this, and white still can't take. Yeah, that's just hard to appreciate here. Hard to appreciate at this late stage. And this is similar to a situation I thought we might have in the game. Rook F4, defend from the side. Yeah, I made it harder than I had to. Even if this happens to still be winning, the king is clearly on the wrong side. And I think a stronger player than myself, even though I do consider myself to be a pretty good chess player, I think they would have pressed forward king d4, king c4. I got a little timid here, and that's a tendency I've noticed in my own games in single rook endings. Tried to hedge my bets when actually white's pawns are very far from being dangerous, and I can safely press forward. So what about the very end? Because I think white had a draw. So I repeated, and then went king g5. So the way to win was still rook c2 check, king d3, rook c1, banking off of rook takes a4, b2. But after king g5, apparently this is a draw. Still tough, though. I mean, I thought I was almost putting white in zugzwang here, because they don't really have a good king move. If they move their king, I can play b2. And when you get b2, a3, rook a1 is coming, and that's good night. So, yeah, this is tricky still. So how does this draw? Rook check. Let's say I do go forward now. h4. So if I cross the equator, now white's going to run. And what if I go king h4? Probably same thing. No, not check. f4. f4. And I guess same thing in this sense. So let's say I take f5. What if rook over, rook b4, and attack the pawn, which is connected to the b pawn? Got it. And if I were to come back and defend, well, then the pawn pushes again. And I'm going to have to, at some point, bring the rook back and just eliminate that pawn. Hard to appreciate, though. White had very little time here. 30 seconds to my 10, but the position's easier to play as black. That's for sure. Yeah, and now white loses because they actually are in zugzwang, I think. If f4, I can take and then intercept the pawn. And what else does white do? They want to keep their rook on the fourth rank where they can defend the pawn and also keep an eye on the a pawn. Very interesting. So f4 is better, or the rook check. Because on f4, let's say I play king f5. I think the problem is going to be h4. No, rook b5. Really? Yeah, this is tricky. Rook b5 and takes, then h4? Got it. And this version wins? No, draws, sorry. Draws for white? How is that different than h4 here, check? Because this would be the analog if white gave me the h pawn instead of the f pawn. So why does this win? f4? I think it's the case that the rook has less. Yeah. I think the difference between this and giving the h pawn instead, or sorry, giving the f pawn instead, is that the rook has less scope along the fourth rank. So with the correct f4, king h4. No, how was I doing this? Now I'm getting myself confused. It's not that. Oh, I guess they can play f5. I don't know. I don't want to confuse myself further, but there was some point I was going to make there about the rook having more scope in giving the f pawn and having the h pawn be the distant pass pawn, but I'm losing my train of thought. Very tricky. Feel free to analyze this, guys. You can always check out the game in the notes. I would need more time to really process this myself. Needless to say, tricky rook ending when it gets to this point. Because, yeah, I've got everything defended here, but I also need my rook on the a file to defend the a pawn, which is in turn defending the b pawn. It's not clear how I can make progress. And because I sent my king to the king side to stop white's pawns, if I can't ever get my king back or free my rook, how do I make progress? That's the problem. And in the game, I was able to make progress because white got put in zugzwang here. Oh, so maybe it was this I was trying to get at. So if f4, king f5, rook b5 takes, h4. Yeah, the rook has more latitude. I guess it's the fifth rank instead of the fourth rank. And also, I'm just straight up cut off. Yeah. So f4, king f5, check, take, versus h4, king h5, check, take, f4. I'm not cut off here because I think I could just play king g4 and then on f5, king g5. Yeah, so the rook has less influence in this circumstance versus the one with the h pawn where the rook was cutting off the king. I think that's the difference. So h4 blew it in terms of the evaluation, but with the time situation, 10-0 game, super tough to appreciate. Even king d3, yeah, it didn't dawn on me that b2 was just winning here. But that's the whole point. Like once the structure gets broken, b2 is a threat. And if white were to move the rook somewhere on the b file, I scoop the pawn, and this pawn sooner or later is a goner. Yeah, and a king move allows b2. So this is a zugzwang. And f4 allows king takes h4. So king d3, I could have won with b2, but I played rook a1, gave a check. Yeah, and now white's actually drawing. So had they played king a1 or king b1 especially, this is actually a draw again. White can wait on the fourth rank. That's funny. Okay, this is a circumstance I've seen before. This is amusing because how do I get out of this situation again? If I play a3, white can go, I think there's a number of moves, rook b4 or rook c3 or even rook a4, funnily enough. Like rook a4. I can't play b2 because my rook hangs. If I give a check, king a1, and then rook takes a3 is a threat. And if a2, I lose the rook here. So this is sometimes a situation you see when the stronger side's king is not participating. Yeah, white can hang out here, and there's no way for me to put white in zugzwang. I don't have any good move with my cluster of pawns and the rook, and I also don't have any move with the king. In fact, I got to be careful not to get too pressed here with my king because I can get cut off. And there's no question about trying to run the king. Just way too far away for that. I'd have to bring my rook back and eliminate the pawn somehow. That's funny. So I blew a win on the board because I didn't play b2 here with my 10 seconds. And then white blew a draw because after rook c2 check in this position, they didn't bring their king to the first rank. They played the semi-natural king a3 coming towards the weak pawn, but getting checkmated. The king b1 or even king a1 was a draw. Tricky, tricky endgame. So yeah, my time management left something to be desired there. This was a critical moment. Even though rook c4 is still winning, I really wish in hindsight I would have played g6 and maybe not even done this h4 thing. I think I should have played g6 sooner. But anyways, g6, allow rook g5, the motif that caught me off guard, but then play f5 so that after rook takes g6, I still play rook c4. The collapse of white's pawns, the d4 and a4 pawns are imminent, but I do not lose the f5 pawn so easily. That's a key difference. That rules out all the counterplay white has. I think this is just a pretty easy win now. White's rook is even screened out. And they could go for my h pawn. But let's say something like this. Might throw in a check here. Maybe this still requires some technique. But let's say I throw in a check. I don't know, yeah, king f2 or king e2, whatever. b5. Yeah, and I guess with the h pawn, I got to watch it a little bit. But b4, let's just say h4. b3, maybe rook b8. Again, using the king should do the trick. Should do the trick as long as I'm careful. Might have to bring my rook back somehow. Try to get behind. Yeah. There's going to be some calculation required, but should get the job done. So interesting game. I think this was a good model game for an IQP position. Keep in mind that if you're the side with the IQP, we flip this around. You don't want to make too many easy trades. If you're going to make trades, they got to have a purpose, either furthering your attacking objectives which is often what white tries to do with the IQP. They try to use their space advantage and their mobility to attack. Or you're maybe trading to actually saddle black with an isolated pawn at some point as well. And I learned a few things here that, I rushed knight bd5. I should have played bishop d7 right away. And white had that for a couple moves, but knight e4 was too simple for white. They actually had an opportunity to make some series of favorable trades with knight takes d5. And I don't think I can do this because of bishop takes hitting the rook. And then my bishop is going to hang like this, or queen takes d5, bishop takes e7. All right. But yeah, nice game. Nice in an instructive sense. Like, I could have improved my technique here. Time management, not terrible, but I actually think I spent way too long contemplating queen takes c3. Like, spending over a third of my time in this position when all these moves are pretty equivalent and good for black. I should play this faster. Okay, thanks to my opponent for the game. This was a strong opponent. Mid 2200s and rapidonchess.com. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and let me know what you think about the Queen's Gambit Accepted as well. Do any of you play this opening? What do you think of it for either white or black? I think it's kind of underrated. I don't have such a great record against it myself from the white side. Okay, thanks as always for watching, guys. Special thanks to the analysis crew who stick around for the analysis of, the nuances in the rook ending and stuff. I really appreciate you guys. And check out the Chessiverse bot climb that I'm going to do soon, too. I think that'll be fun and instructive. All right, guys, take care. We'll see ya.